Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I did get a text from Dr. Rothchild. She's going to be a few minutes late, but I think maybe we can get started. I appreciate you all being here this evening. Kind of enlighten us as to your budgets and let us know what you're thinking in terms of 2024. So I don't know, do I turn it over to you, Eileen?
Sure, and Council, thank you again for being here. It's our third time here. We're grateful to be able to come and talk about all the good things that are happening in the city. So Jack Reager, Director of Information Technology, will lead us off, and we'll go right down the table.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Council, and thank you for your time this evening. I look forward to chatting a little bit about what
Excuse me, Jack, can you pull your mic on and closer to you?
It is definitely on.
Okay. Just if you could pull a little closer, because I can't even.
I'll use my outside voice.
Thanks. You know what? Maybe we should turn that speaker this way. Do you think, Frank? Can you turn it? Sure. Since there's nobody in the audience? There we go.
All right, we'll give that a shot. Jack Reager, I'm the Director of IT for the City of Scranton, and hopefully you can hear me a little more effectively. I'll talk to you a little bit about my team this evening, what we do, and what we're looking at with the 2024 budget. Again, I appreciate your time. A little bit about where we are and what we do. So we service 500 employees. We have 12 facilities that we maintain on a daily basis. Those facilities include fire, police, DPW, parks, and City Hall. The parks we'll talk a little bit more about what that means to extending our footprint and how that whole world will come together over the next year with some of the investments we'll be making in public safety. My team has to handle 24/7 response. I had an opportunity to sit in earlier this week with Chief Judge and Chief Carroll. I think they did an excellent job of framing what they're doing with their team. I think it's important in my role to communicate to you that for them to be effective in their jobs, we need to be able to support them. So when the doors don't open on Saturday morning, it's my team that's going out, and that's some of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. We handle specialized software suites. You've heard a lot about Axon. I'm not sure that you know so much about Genetech, which actually is the backbone of the camera system throughout the city. WatchGuard is the previous body cams that have been used for the PD and that we will be sunsetting and now implementing the new Axon systems and access controls across all city departments, all city buildings, all city's facilities. We're in charge of the network infrastructure. What you see from Wi-Fi to wireless to how all of these organizations go out and do the jobs that they do on a daily basis are handled by my team. We handle user support. Some of you, just a simple password reset is coming through my help desk. So we handle everything from day-to-day patrolmen to the individuals within the administration and even our extended boards. Software training. So we see on a daily basis users who need to understand how to use these systems that we've integrated over the last 2 years. They're robust. It's something where we're looking for folks to work with tools they've never worked with before. You may find somebody in a patrol vehicle that's never actually worked with 8 cameras running simultaneously in that vehicle. They've been trained in their specialization. They haven't necessarily been trained in that technology. So it's our job to help them ramp up and learn those tools and leverage those tools. I and members of my team deal with vendor and contract management. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. I've been with the city now for, this will be my first full year, partial year last year. We inherited a lot of legacy contracts and a lot of legacy investments that might not necessarily align with us in the future. I'll talk about one specifically as we sort of time out tonight. We've found ourselves in a position where we're able to stretch our dollar further, leverage better tool sets, and take advantage of services that we've maybe not necessarily needed over the years, and now we've sort of seen that with our team and moved forward with it. We've in-housed a lot of what we've previously as a city outsourced. We handle digital communication. Weekly, I listen into residents' concerns, and I know we talk a lot about what's on the website and what's not on the website. That goes through my office. I've shared with your group before, within 48 hours of receiving that information, we will publish it. So it's a type of work that while we're handling everything else, we're still looking at external communications and making sure that information is open and available. My staff is 4 full-time employees, 3 plus myself. So when we talk a little bit about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and I think both of the chiefs earlier in the week did a pretty good job of framing what we're doing. My hope is tonight that I can share a little bit more about why you invest in IT the way that you do and the team that you have. Next slide, please. Got it already. So we inherited an outsourced help desk when I took this role. What that meant was we didn't have a lot of institutional knowledge, and we needed to develop something that would capture that information and train our team going forward. If we see the same issues over and over, we should know how to correct it quickly. If we didn't have that help desk in-house, we didn't have that ability. So we brought the help desk system in-house. We eliminated a previous contract. I can tell you as of November 1st, we've closed 4,449 help desk requests. Could be as simple as reset my password, could be as complicated as we need to pull this footage from a patrol vehicle because we need it for an active investigation. We run the gamut. We've detected roughly 5,300 network events over the past year per month. What I'll talk about with our investments is what we're doing for security and what we're doing for infrastructure. On a daily basis, this network is targeted, and we have tools in place to monitor and to defeat those. On the lighter side of things, website traffic, we saw over 186,000 unique visitors over the last year coming to the website. We talk about communication. We talk about the city's responsibility and the administration's responsibility to get that information out there. We do so through the web. We've done it with a large degree of success. We've talked about OpenGov. We talked about licensing and inspections. Something to think about again is real-time revenue collection through OpenGov. We have collected well over $1 million in real time for permits. That's not something where we're waiting for a check to clear. We don't have to have a one-on-one contact downstairs. It is a streamlined event, thankfully implemented through technology, which is what we support.
So, excuse me, compare that to before OpenGov with regards to revenues.
Unfortunately, I wasn't here before the system was in place. Revenue-wise, maybe Eileen, you can speak to collections in terms of licensing inspections.
I mean, is it up 20%, 50%?
Well, we do receive a significantly larger amount of funding through the credit card system than we did before. If you recall, our credit card system, people would have to come here and swipe the credit card here. So it was really underutilized.
Okay.
We can look at previous dollars and cents and talk about it, but the reality is this clears instantaneously, anytime, 24 hours a day. So if we think about project highlights over the last year, we're looking at network enhancements, and we've completed network enhancements. The VPN, it's not really exciting to you folks, but the reality of what it does, our patrol vehicles all use computer-aided dispatch with a CAD system that actually runs through what's called a VPN. Previously, that VPN was sharing time with somebody who's sending an email in City Hall. It wasn't configured properly. We've adjusted that. There's been performance increases. We've completed a lot of work on the public safety fleet. Chief Carroll talked about it earlier. MDTs, laptops. We've refit top to bottom for our fleet. They have now viable systems in their vehicles. We've been working through the beginning of the Axon integration. That won't finish entirely until next year. And we've been dealing with mobile communications. A large number of the police department were using personal cell devices to operate and to investigate. We needed to change that. So we've deployed more mobile communications for them to utilize. We've deployed laptops for the detectives, which, believe it or not, previously didn't exist until this year. So if you were a detective and you went out to investigate something, you were taking notes in a notebook and then returning to headquarters to actually fill out your reports. It was not really a viable or efficient way to do business, in my opinion. We talk about the public.
Yeah, if I could just ask for a second. So if one of our police officers is out and doing an investigation or dealing with some type of situation, they can do the reports immediately right from their vehicle?
Anecdotally, and I'll apologize to Chief Carroll in advance, he shared with me after an event that happened, he said, you know, it was very similar to what you see in the movies. Our detectives were able to open the laptops on the hood of their car and move forward. So the fact that that didn't exist previously, a little disheartening, but now, yes, those detectives are able to work along those lines.
Thank you.
The public safety camera system, we've added to parks. We have worked with a number of new cameras and new systems. You'll hear about the LPRs. I think previously you've seen some legislation on that. That's a license plate reader. That system will add another layer of intelligence to the organization, and something, again, my team is involved in the support of. And we are also spin up new facilities. There's a number of investments in parks throughout the city, as Eileen and her team on the OECD side now across the board is bringing these new parks online. We're looking at how we can ensure that we've got proper visibility in the parks from a public safety standpoint. A couple weeks ago, there was a concern brought by a citizen about NAOG and the parking. Within 2 weeks of that concern coming to council, the mayor and Eileen reached out to me, and we deployed those cameras within 2 weeks of that concern. So those parking lots are actually covered and in the system as a result. Again, that's the type of things that go through IT on a daily basis. Software integration and trainings. As I mentioned, we've got a number of tools. There's a number of folks who have been involved in these career positions for a number of times that haven't had to work with technology as we're asking them today. My team is involved in training them up, making sure they understand how to use the tools and what to work with going forward on a daily basis. I've outlined some of them there. Software and hardware license right sizing. So our first year, we saved well over $250,000. This year, we're tracking over $250,000 again. I'll talk about some of those contracts. They're legacies, so it wasn't something where we could break it. We had to wait till we got to a point where we can go through and look at what really the city needs and build to suit, for lack of a better term. The reality is the market has changed. So what happened 3 or 4 years ago when you said, hey, this is what we need, we can't really scale. Now we're able to scale a little more, but with that, we also can anticipate what our team needs are and make sure we build software around that.
So, Mr. Reager, when you're talking about the software and hardware licensing,
Yes.
Is that in past budgets? Do you know what line item that was located in?
So we'll talk a little bit about our line items. You'll notice that this year we've broken out our line items.
Yep.
So it would have been buried under either professional services or supplies, which when dealing with the controller, it didn't really work. So what you'll see in this budget and budgets going forward, and this started with Business Administrator West, it continued with Business Administrator Eileen, Cipriani, we realized that there's a lot going on in IT, and we needed to do a better job of making sure everybody understands it. So, we moved to a zero trust network. I can tell you that was the day that I probably went on a couple carports throughout the city. The reality is that we cannot put USB device on the machine any longer. We cannot bring outside files in. We cannot take city files outside of city walls. It's something that needs to happen. Large organizations, especially medical, would not have. Yep.
There it is.
The technology guy stepped on the power.
AV Club is what I prefer. We can move on to 2024.
Can you explain that zero trust network?
So right, so devices that would go in or out of our network, we've locked down our devices throughout all of our city buildings, facilities, and individuals. I'm sure there's individuals at this table that don't necessarily love it either. You need to work through systems that will record everything that's transacting through the city. So if we're sending an email, that's an obvious one, but if we're moving large files, we're not putting large files on USB drives any longer. That's not something that works in our environment, so.
Okay.
What we're looking to do going forward, as Councilman Schuster just sort of alluded and stole all of my thunder, we have reorganized our line items. We can go through them in detail. I don't know if we want to sort of pivot. I didn't really put them up here, but we can talk about them.
I noticed they were broken out this year,
Yep.
and I was just wondering where they were located last year. I mean, you answered my question.
If anybody else has further questions around. So something to keep in mind, when we talk about a piece of hardware, if it's a switch in a closet or a device that's actually there to prevent intrusion, you actually have to not only buy that device, you have to warranty it and pay for software licensing on it. So it's not a one and done. That's the unfortunate sort of creep that happens with budget. So why I, as all of us are very cognizant of how we spend dollars, there's pieces that are outside of our realm of control. If Cisco decides that it's a 10% increase, it's a 10% increase, and we do our best to manage those and work with it. It is absolutely not possible to turn those things off. We're not going to save a nickel by turning those off because it will expose us to potential threats. Along those lines, continued network hardening and upgrades. I had mentioned this in one of our previous meetings the last couple of weeks. Before the end of the year, our equipment will be on site, and we are doing a complete redesign of City Hall and PD. This is woefully overdue. It is in this year's budget, and we are going to do some final pieces next year between capital and some of the things that exist in budget today. The reality is, after 8 to 10 years, this hardware is full of potential threats, so it needs to be swapped out, and that's what we'll be working through. Complete and ongoing hardware refresh, that's new laptops and desktops. We've gotten about 80% of the city done top to bottom. They were all working with hardware between 5 and 8 years old. Again, not really something that's securely viable. While, you know, you can work on an old machine and get email, it's not necessarily how I'd like to see the city doing business. Complete the Axon migration. Complete citywide 2FA upgrade. We've been working with two-factor. That's the annoyance that you get from Microsoft when you try to access your email. We're going to go a step further. You'll either have an app that pushes a rotating code to you, or you will carry a little key fob type device that's going to push a number to you. Those numbers actually will allow you to log in, so that ensures that there are no shared usernames and logins. There's no ability that somebody can use a city system unless they have that challenge and use that device. City broadband, I would say, has fallen under other duties as assigned. It's exciting. The administration and specifically the mayor is really position the city to be in a spot where we can bring in not only top quality broadband, do it at an affordable price, and do it ubiquitously. That's something that not a lot of cities in the country have been able to do. The folks that are around the table have done this in major metropolitans, and they have come to Scranton. So we are doing our best to organize how that happens, ensuring that our citizens are put in a position that they can really benefit from this, looking at our institutions, and it's pretty exciting. So over the next year, we should see some major announcements around it and some folks coming to town. Staff training and IT certifications is something that we really need to leverage. One of those new line items you'll see, Mr. Schuster, is certifications and training. It should always have been there, in my opinion. My folks need to be certified in special tools. It's not something that we were going to allocate out of supplies.
Yeah, so was that in supplies or was it in professional services?
So since I've been here, we have not invested in certifications. We've just not been in a place for it, either budget-wise or timing-wise. So this is something where, forward-looking, if we want to continue to invest and build out an infrastructure here, it's something we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you see the price increase from last year to this year, it's about a $204,000 increase.
Yep.
Where is most of that $204,000 located?
It's going to be on the hardware side when we're talking about those network pieces, and that's something that, you know, to give you perspective, 12 physical servers in the city, $50,000 worth of licensing renewals. That's not something where we're getting anything for it except keeping the lights on. So that's where we're seeing this, and that's absolutely out of our hands. We can't negotiate those prices. So that's the pothole that's associated with dealing with technology. There's so much that's outside of our hands. Where we have reduced our reliance on outside vendors, we still have to deal with these manufacturers and work with those pieces.
Yeah, I mean, the 850 number is what sticks out. I mean, that's
Yep.
what first brought me to the fact that these were broken out this year rather than
Yep.
other years. But I mean, that price there, has that increased by 200,000 or it's pretty much spread?
That's a large percentage of it. So that would be the one. And I can work through with you and kind of go through the pieces, absolutely. That is the largest increase that you'll see is on that line. I mean, you should see a decrease on the professional services side. What had happened previously was those warranties would live under professional services.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I'm not an expert in this by no means, but I'm familiar with the licensing.
Yep.
And how often do they have to be renewed or upped? And I know when that happens, it can be very costly. So where are we at with some of these?
What I've been attempting to do is buy out in increments of 2 to 3 years because we see significant price drops. And that was sort of that 3-year licensing legacy that I inherited. We're doing a lot of that investment next year. We've done a portion of it this year, but the larger ticket items, unfortunately, are falling this year, and I anticipate some next year. I can give you a full breakout of them. The reality is we've cleaned up as many of the little ones as we can, for lack of a better term, and we're trying to buy them out in 3-year increments. Again, to what you're implying, to anticipate what this is going to do, we should not see this. This should not do this. This should do this. So.
And then most of the capital stuff we completed last year, right? Most of the bigger upgrades, or is that coming this year?
There's still a degree of it that's this year. So
The big lift was last year?
Right. Well, 2023, yes. Sorry, I'm still this year. I've still got about 45 days to get stuff done. Last year was a pretty large lift, or this current year's a pretty large lift, I should say. This, you'll see in the capital that we do have a pretty good dip compared to the previous year. We've righted a lot of wrongs. Challenges and risks is probably where it can land. Active ongoing network events. I told you it's about 5,000 a month. It's not going away. Government entities, anything with a .gov, anything that has our footprint, it's a problem. We're going to be on it day and night. It's kind of what we're in place for. I would be lying if I told you I felt we were properly staffed and properly resourced. We're not. We're not going to be. So we do the work that we can do, and we put third parties in place where we can. We have a 24/7 monitoring tool that's actually monitored by full-time government officials that is under that licensing and software's line item, and we augment as possible. Software utilization and adoption, this is citywide. We just need to be better with software. As I said, we have individuals who haven't necessarily come through with technical training. We're going to get them up to speed. 2FA adoption, we're going to complete the rollout and with that do some staff training. The reality is with 500 employees, when you tell somebody they either need a cell phone push or carry this a little key fob, there's going to be a little bit of resistance. So we'll work through and educate folks along those lines.
So Jack, so that's like the two-step identification?
That's exactly it, yep.
Yeah, okay, I have that with my
Anytime you touch a city system like OpenGov or, log into your city-issued machine, you'll now have that challenge, which we don't have today.
Yeah, I have that with my company. If I want
got
to go
it.
in, I
Yep.
have to get a push in my phone and then verify.
Yep.
Okay.
Right, that's exactly it, it's duo. What'll happen is we'll have some resistance early on, and Ms. Eskra can probably speak to the insurance upside when we finally complete this. So, specialized system usage, that IT certification piece. We're fighting a little bit above our weight class. I'll talk to you about what I sort of see with our organization going forward. The reality is we need certification, we need training to work with these tool sets. To me, the largest challenge and risk that we'll talk about is staff retention. I have a team of 3. I've spoke about this group last year. I'll speak about this group again this year. I wanted to do a comparison. In my past life, we talked about offsets. Where are you going to shave a dollar to invest a dollar? And when we're thinking about how we're handling vendor contracts and how we're sort of working through those pieces, I wanted to give you a tangible example rather than talking about a philosophical one. So that Microsoft investment, every year for the past 3 years, we've been paying $127,000. We just completed our re-up, and we're going to drop that to $92,000. We're right-sizing. We're not losing anything. We're gaining more system power. We're adding more seats. We're adding a number of more viable items. We've saved $34,000. What you'll notice in this year's budget is that the administration has proposed salary increases in my department to the tune of a little over $17,000. With that one particular move, we've offset any investment that we would make in our team. When I came here, we had no institutional knowledge as a city. Still, to date, we have somebody who's probably about 2 years. One of the reasons I wanted to pull this out, and one of the reasons I kind of wanted to talk about it, was an old adage, words matter. I had a text message after one of the previous budget discussions around this table, and the team member said, what could we have done different this year? What are we not making the mark on? So my folks work about 50 hours a week on average. We don't qualify for overtime. Average age is 26 years old with my team. They carry student debt. Some of them live at home, some of them rent. What we're seeing is they really care about the work that they're doing. Those words matter because when we talk about salary freezes, their immediate thought was culture related. I'm not meeting the mark. So my hope is when you're deliberating and you're thinking about these things, when we talk about the concept of a salary freeze, please remember, I'm dealing with folks, and I'll tell them to their face, they're junior, they haven't been around the block long enough. They hear that and don't think they did the work right. And as a manager, and I think the administration all feels this, we're trying to work with folks here who really care about the work that they do. What's great about my department, they're young, they care, and they're skilled. It's my job to keep them here. I need to be an anchor. I don't want them to bounce. They can absolutely make more money somewhere else. So please keep that in mind, because we have 500 folks who are around the tent here in the city. They do a lot of work. I didn't come here to make a whole lot of money. I came here and took on a whole lot of risk. 500 folks, over 5,000 intrusions a month. I can go through a litany of what we're doing. August of 2020, there was a cyber event in this city. It was ransomware. Every day, that risk is real. We invest a very low percent into technology and security throughout this city. So when we think about our people and thinking about keeping them here, what I can't put a dollar on is their institutional knowledge, their system knowledge, their network knowledge. I would love to keep these folks here. So just keep that in mind as you're sort of looking at things and using some of those words. It's important to me.
So one thing I didn't say to that, taking a look at those, there's some small increases here, but when we take a look at the 3 years or so that's been going on, you know, you take a position that has went from $38,000 to $49,000. It's a big jump.
Right.
And then you go from 49 to 50, small jump, and now you're going from 50 to, you know what I mean? You had a $10,000 jump to a $1,000 jump to an $8,000
Right.
jump. And I get in the field, you know what I mean? Those are the salaries you're going to have, but this is the job of council, and I mean,
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be
And it's
doing
the
my
job
if I didn't say it.
Absolutely. It's the job that we have to do when we spend our dollars. The reality is $10,000 spent on retaining an employee is going to be saved probably about $85,000 with how we retrain somebody new, anything we're doing with specialization. I get it.
I think the thing also too, to put it into, to reference it with everything else that's going on, or to put it in perspective, you know, we saw some tough years with the COVID years where
Yep.
people in the other sectors were seeing very small 2% raises when we're seeing
Right.
33% raises, and now we're getting into a point where we're asking for tax increases. So when it comes to a tax increase, you know what I mean? These are questions I'm going to ask. So,
For sure.
I mean, reassure your department in-house that what kind of job they're doing.
They're
And I
watching
don't-
now, so you're doing it.
Yeah. So I mean, I can't say individually how they're doing, but I mean, you have your reinforcement system that you have in your office, but as a council member, this is what
Yep,
I have to do,
and I
and I'm not
appreciate
speaking
that.
for anyone else.
Yep, I appreciate that.
And I think, and just to jump in here, Jack, I hope you don't mind, but just to illustrate the point of investing in people and the fact that as we grow our technology and as we improve and we make strides and bring the city into the 21st century, you know, things like two-factor authentication, they have to learn a new system. That's a new set of duties. But that has a material benefit to the city. So that policy that we have for cyber liability with our insurance company right now, without two-factor authentication, we're limited to a $100,000 sublimit in coverage. Once we move to two-factor authentication, we're eligible for the full policy limit with coverage at $2 million. That's a real material, tangible benefit to the city.
And it is a numbers game across the board. And as I said, I do appreciate, I've been on both sides of it.
And you coming and touting your department is great, so the people out there
And
get
I
to hear what your
appreciate that.
department is doing.
Yep.
Jack, so you're here a year now, or is it a little more than a year?
A little more than a year.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Sitting here a year and 3-4 months
Yep.
since you started, how do you feel the city's positioned in terms of IT, or improved, or the challenges in the future? Where do you think we sit?
And so one of the...
And how do you feel as the
Right.
head of that department, as far as the trajectory of where we're headed?
I'm sleeping way better this year than I did last year. Our trajectory is absolutely where it needs to be, and we're on the right path. We're not overspending on contractors we don't need. We were paying maintenance fees that, you know, to vendors that we don't even call. So we've tightened up in ways that just, you know, needed to happen. our trajectory is on the right path. We are making substantial investments, and these are investments that will pay dividends, and they will last over time. So to that end, I would not do this any other way. We have been, the city has invested in technology, and your group has invested in technology. We're not here, scraping. The reality is we don't invest enough, but to your point, this is, it's a municipal government. We're not a corporation. We're never going to have that top tier, but we're going to be solid B-plus players with the folks that we have around the table and the investments that we're making.
Okay, thank you.
And just to,
I, for one, are glad that we're less reliant on contractors. When I first started on here, every month we had a new one.
Right.
For different parts of IT. So I'm thrilled to see that aspect
Thank
of
you.
it.
And
one
I
thing
will
I
tell you
could,
that I feel, in the short time I've been here, 2 years myself, I know previous to me getting here, just what Mr. McAndrew had indicated, it seemed like there was a contract here, and then it was dropped, and then it just, right, it just seemed like we were all over the place. I feel, like we are kind of headed in the right direction. I feel like you're making huge strides.
I appreciate
and, I applaud your department for that, and appreciate the way that you're working with our police department to really add those type of technologies and upgrades for them to be able to do their job better and more efficiently. And hey, training, I know, anytime.
Right.
The only thing that's constant is change. So you have to just get used to it and adjust to it. And I know change is tough for some people, but the bottom line is when it comes to technology, there are some bad actors out there that are trying to infiltrate our systems, not just our systems, but everybody's IT system. So it's important that we have a lot of these protections, and the training, I'm sure, is key too. So just for your other three workers, let them know that they're appreciated.
I appreciate that.
And also to say, you have your workers, they're living in the city, they're investing in their city by working for their city, so you have that symbiotic relationship that's going on.
Yep.
And you coming here again, saying what your department is doing, fighting for each of these things in a line item.
Right.
And this is what I expect from the department, so thank you. There was another point I was going to make there,
Yeah.
but I forget what it was. It is that we came out of Act 47, you know what I mean?
Right.
We were a struggling city, we're trying to get a better financial footing, and them to know that, hey, let's stick it out, let's improve this, and our work is going to show for it, and then that'll come in the,
Right.
maybe a little bit longer game than one would think
Yeah,
initially.
I hope 26-year-olds think in the long game, but I don't know. We'll see. I appreciate that, though. Thank you. Any other questions? And again, I would be remiss if not to remind you, any of this technology, I know when we had Rubicon in, you digested a lot in an hour and a half. Any of these tools, let us know if you'd like to go through them in more detail. As much as we train on a daily basis, we can absolutely teach and train and take you through these tools so you understand the investments.
I still have one issue with Granicus.
Yes,
I want to be able to easily search it.
I chatted with Frank a little bit about it.
There's so much in there.
I know.
And instead of me bugging Frank or somebody, say, could you pull up that ordinance?
We have to load it different from the transcriber.
3 years ago. I should be
Yes.
able to just keyword it like any other system.
I agree.
Well,
We'll get there.
okay. I'm going to hold you to it this year. I asked it last year,
you can.
too. Okay.
I will get it done.
I'll remind you, don't worry.
Good evening, Council. Adam Joyce, City Treasurer. I came down from the Business Administration Office in September after 9 years up there. I'm just going to give you a little overview of what goes on in the Treasury Department. So we are the physical custodian of all the monetary assets, all the daily deposits, all the checks that come down daily go through us, and they're checked by the two girls that work in my office to make sure they're deposited in the correct accounts. Also, we get checks from single tax office, whether it be real estate transfer tax, earned income, LST, business privilege, mercantile. And those checks are also broken down by myself to make sure that each amount and account are correct. We acted as a liaison for the other collection entities, whether it be Portnoy or the Tax Claim Bureau. We field multiple calls daily for people calling about Portnoy, asking about how much they owe or what years they're delinquent on. Also with the Tax Claim Bureau, with people questions on tax bills, if we can answer, we usually do. One of our numbers actually linked to one of their phone lines, so we get a lot of their calls. and we try to answer the best we can, but if not, we will direct them back. My current staff is 2 full-time union clerical workers and myself. Small department compared to everybody else. This year so far in 2023, we had 52 permanent refuse exonerations.
Excuse me, can I just stop you right there?
Sure.
So what do you mean by permanent? Because I still get complaints that, poor Miss McGillicuddy with the duplex, who hasn't been there in 50
Right.
years, doesn't want to rent to anybody, still gets billed, still has to pay it, still has to wait to get reimbursed.
So permanent exoneration would be almost like people that have demolished properties, something that is land that they pay the refuse fee for, and it's on the tax and
so I understand that.
every year, as soon as they pay it, they can immediately contact us and we'll give them. Yeah, all the other ones would be like that, where you have to provide your utility bill.
So that's still, like, the question, I guess I should just simplify my question. What's in place is going to remain in place. There's no looking at, like the woman I spoke of, like a better way to serve the resident.
Right, I'm not sure on that.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm sure, absolutely. I know, yeah, if you own the other side of the house, you're not renting it out, there should be an easier way to.
And I get
Correct.
that maybe, the city feels that someone's going to sneak a tenant in there, but there's
Right.
I mean, there's properties that I live near that
Absolutely.
I know no one has, or there's properties that are still being billed that, you're a duplex. Yeah, I was a duplex 30 years ago.
Right.
So what's in place to help that or fix that? Is that being looked at, or, because I still get these complaints. I walk in Garrity's or Price Chopper, I still get these complaints, so
I know
I want to be able to tell them something.
the rental registration from the LIPS department is actively making sure that the current amount of refuse payments per houses are correct. So like if you are paying the 2, but yeah, if you're paying the 2, I think it still has to go through the process of utility bills unless you deemed that you're exonerated or permanently exonerated.
But again, I'm saying, like, say someone who owned a duplex.
Correct.
My house was a duplex.
Right.
80 years ago. It no longer is. But there's some houses out there that are in the same scenario where they're still once in a while getting billed for two trash fees.
Then you can bring it up to the,
Who do they go to? Like,
Robin Salemba handles the rental now, and they send people out and she will update the poor enough people, whether it be one pay or the county, and you can pay just the one then.
Okay.
So she's the person that contacts it, and she updates whether it be Port Enough or the county, that if it is just,
So who would investigate that? Who
that'd be a question.
confirms it, or?
Robbins does the refuse.
Okay.
So the rental officer.
Because it's still, I'm not picking on anybody, but it's
No, absolutely,
it's
yeah.
still an
It's-
issue
yeah,
out there
yeah,
that exists.
And it is very cumbersome, right? It's backwards. You're paying something and getting it back. Hopefully, with the rental, as Adam said, we'll be able to go through and establish that it isn't a rental anymore. And we'll be able to do that because we'll have the inspection process.
Okay. Thank you.
Also, there was 61 refuse exonerations. They were just, like I said before, people who are, after November, will submit their utility bills, and they will get their refuse fee back, obviously, if there's no activity or limited activity on their side of their house. We deal with the Act 98 escrow, as we're fire damaged properties, where we hold a certain percentage until the property is either brought up to code or demolished and inspected by NEIC, and they will deem it necessary or completed, and then we return their money to them. We also participate in a bunch of different property sales, whether it be upset sales, judicial sales, or repository sales with the county. Some of those we will get money for back taxes. Some of them, whether it be real estate taxes, refuse, they'll go to the proper people. One of the things I'm trying to work on currently is increased customer service with Portnoy. I know I was on email with you, Mr. King, about one of the residents reached out, how she has a hard time paying, and there is a hardship waiver. I talked to Jack, we're trying to get that on the website to make sure people know it's available, so that they know they don't have to pay that full amount, right? There is a way, and Portnoy always already told me that there is a payment plan that they have posted, and I'm going to try to get that on the website as well, so that people know
I appreciate that.
there is an outlet
That was
for
communicated
it.
back to that person?
Yes, I reached out. I didn't get in contact with her. I reached out a couple times.
Okay.
But yeah, I want to at least let people know that there is another way, or at least a payment plan you can get on so that you don't fall
Okay.
extremely behind.
Thank you.
Yep. Just a quick overview of the budget. Obviously, I only have one light item, and it's salary. 2 full-time girls, a clerical union, in which they'll be under negotiation, so nothing will change. And then my salary.
Anyone have any questions for Adam? Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Kaylee Pikulski, the HR Director. Thank you very much for the opportunity for having me here to be able to talk about our department. I feel like we have a good story to tell, so I appreciate the time being here. So I wanted to go over some of the highlights. We achieved a lot this year. The first would be we completed the city's first healthcare dependent audit. It was actually finished at the end of 2022, but by the time we got all of the information in, it was February of 2023. In the whole program, there was 95 or 99.5% of response rate of the employees and retirees that responded to the survey. We had 12 employees and retirees voluntarily remove 13 dependents. We had 5 employees, retirees, had 7 dependents involuntarily removed because they didn't meet the requirements. So it was a total of 25 dependents that were removed. With that, there were 23 employees that their dependents had a different commercial insurance as their primary insurance. So, and our plan through Highmark wasn't aware of it. So Highmark is now in the process of going back and trying to get that money that Highmark shouldn't have been billed for because they had other insurance. So that's been a work in progress. So basically the city of Scranton, we're realizing over a $200,000 in an annual plan savings. Then the next we have reduction in healthcare costs. A lot of this comes from the renewals and the post-65 Benestar program. Willis Towers Watson did a lot of negotiating for us and was able to get a $130,000 cost avoidance. Prices continue to rise, so really it's not a windfall for the city, these savings. It's more of a cost avoidance. So it's not like there's, added money in the bottom line. I just wanted to be clear about that. The way that we're able to achieve this is through contract negotiations, plan governance, and programs designed to contribute to this cost avoidance. In 2023, the cost avoidance was $1,098,000, and it's projected to be in 2024, $1,160,000. So inflation continues. The key to this is to figure out ways to avoid certain costs. We recently went to a formulary drug plan, which was a huge savings as well for the city.
Are there also like wellness incentives included? Some of the healthcare programs will have like a wellness incentive, like, okay, if you go for these preventative appointments.
We've talked about that, but we haven't actually, and that could be something that we work on for this year, but we've talked about that with Highmark to have some incentives, but we haven't enacted that yet.
Okay,
But
because I believe that's something that could then reduce
absolutely
the cost as
now
well.
that our cost is manageable, we can start kind of fine tuning and getting some of the things that we want.
Okay, thank you.
And in our workman's comp program, it continues to decline. I'm really, our workman's comp manager works diligently at this. There's less lost time, there's less medical-only claims, there's just a constant trend going down. It's slowed up a little bit, but it's still trending down, and I think it's because of the process that we put in place. As soon as an event happens, we notify PMA, they get a claim number. That claim number then it's there and it's ready. So if there is more treatment that's needed, they follow up with one of our listed providers to go and get checked out. They're assigned a case manager if needed to see them go down the right road instead of many different roads. It's just been going very, very well. We have safety meetings. We try to mitigate risk, see where our problems are every month, see what we can do about that. And there's a group of people that come to those meetings every month that represent the fire department, the police department, DPW. We're all working together as a city to make it safer here. We enacted employee evaluations. We started them in October. We plan on getting all the non-union employees done by the end of the year. And then starting in January, the employees will be evaluated by their managers on their anniversary date. So that's been going well. We should be all finished up by December. A lot have already been completed. We've enacted monthly training sessions for managers and employees. That started in June, and I'd like to see that. We're going to expand on that and have more detailed programs in the new year. And then we also were able to get our employee handbook out.
I would like to just say a couple things. So I'm thrilled with the employee evaluations. I asked for that 2 years ago
Yes.
and been pushing for that, along with the employee handbooks. I just want to let you guys know it's a better sell when you come to us for raises, when you can say, we did performance appraisals on employees yearly, and they did well, and you can defend them better to us. I hope you understand what I mean.
I do,
Because the public, they're like, well, these guys are getting raises, they're not even evaluated. So I'm thrilled with the fact that and the employee handbook have been completed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also like to say the same thing. I also was pushing for some of those things to be put in as they are in every other workplace. What is going to be the timeline for those? Have evaluations been completed as up to this point?
Well,
or-
we started them in October, and we're going to get everybody done by the end of the year. And then once January comes, everyone will be evaluated on their anniversary date by their managers.
Okay, so it's going to be anniversary date
Yes.
rather than calendar. Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
So if someone's a new employee, then will it be a year before they receive an evaluation?
Well, before they have the formal evaluation, yes, but that's another thing that I'm trying to fine tune as far as having like coaching after 30, 60, and 90 days for the new employees that come in that might feel a little lost, because in the past there hasn't been a lot of on-the-job training. So when you're new here, it would really be helpful for the new employees to have a little extra guidance in the beginning.
Definitely, yeah, and I think it's pretty typical in the workforce, like your first 3 months of a position, and then to have some sort of evaluation or discussion around your performance or anything that the employee might need help with. I was wondering too if there was a specific program that was being utilized for the evaluations.
It's not, what I can do is I can send you what the form that we did. I kind of developed it with a lot of different, looking at a lot of different things. It's not a specific program or anything like that, but I can send it to you and you can see it.
Sure, I'd be interested in seeing
Okay.
that. And then included in that form, are there yearly goals for the
That would
employee
depend
that
on
they have to
what the
complete?
manager wants to bring into it. So the way we set it up was that the employee gets the evaluation first and does the self-evaluation. And then the manager will do an evaluation on that employee, and then they get together and meet and go over things. So the employee has a chance to, so it's not that dreaded evaluation thing. So they have a chance to say what they feel that they're doing well at, also what they need help with. And the manager has the chance to also, say, notice the strengths and weaknesses, and it's a balance, and it's not like, dreading, what am I doing wrong, where am I falling short? It's just a chance where both can see where they're coming from.
Of course, yeah. I think it's helpful, though, to have, for people to help, or to work on developing those goals so they know what they want to accomplish for that year in their
Yes.
position. And that could be in combination with the manager to discuss.
Yeah, and that is part of it, so, yep.
Determine them after the evaluation is complete, but just a suggestion, something that I think would be helpful for our employees.
Yes, thank you.
So this sounds like a pre and post type of setup, like the Danielson framework in education, which is fair with the employee, where the employee has an opportunity to, to defend their work for the most part, or hit the points that are set, like different domains within their job.
Yeah, I think it's
within their job.
important because lots of times an employee might do something that's a really good thing, and, we as managers, sometimes we forget about it, right? Or we don't recognize it for what it was when it happened because we're so busy with everything else, and it's a chance for the employee to actually say, remember I did this. And then the manager gets the chance to acknowledge that,
Well, evidence of performance, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Well, as my colleagues have indicated, I know that Mr. McAndrew and Mr. Schuster, they were pushing for this for quite a long time, and I'm thrilled to see that that's happening in the city. I think it's important for the employees, too, in terms of morale. I think people want to be evaluated. People want to know, how am I doing? And they also want the opportunity to be able to make you aware as the employer of things, because once again, everybody's busy. Everybody's got a million things going on. And sometimes some of those great things are overlooked. So I think that that's a positive thing for the city, and to have an employee handbook now, I think is a great step. So I'll ask you the same question I asked Jack Reager. How long have you been here now, Kaylee? A year and a half?
It'll be 2 years in January.
2 years in January. Where do you feel you're at now, 2 years later?
When I got here, it was, I don't want to say anything negative, but there was a lot of work to do. There were we didn't have an employee handbook.
Sure.
We weren't doing evaluations. There were a lot of processes that just needed to be established. So, I think, between myself, my team, I have a great team in that office. Everybody works together. Union, non-union, I have both in my office, and we are a team in there. And then I also have guidance from the law department, from the BA,
Sure.
from IT. So I just feel like we have a great team established here, and we all really work together, and I think HR is just
So you're on a
humming
positive
along.
trajectory as
Yes.
well. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
humming
well,
along.
that's good.
Yep.
And I fully understand putting those processes in place, and it does take time for those things to happen, because you just don't want to throw them together. You want to make sure that you do them correctly. So we appreciate all the work that's gone into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So having those processes in place helps, it's a tool to help make your job easier. I've seen workplaces that have both, where they have the evaluation that comes up due to the hire date or based upon the hire date, and also the yearly evaluations. And then the self-evaluation helps with wherever the so-called discrepancy is. It's a conversation starter for the supervisor to give that employee that feedback over something that may have seen as different than the employee saw it. Something to possibly keep in mind is, because we run the way we do in the budget cycle, the way we run it would be to possibly have those evaluations leading up to the budget. So, when the department heads come to council for those increases, we would have those on hand.
And next year, we'll have a full year of doing them, so you will, we'll redact names, but we can certainly give you copies of what it was that we did, or, talk privately about it, or.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
council would need to see individual employee evaluations, but if you guys have the data to back up your employees' performance through the year, it helps us better to make our decision.
Absolutely, yep.
Are the managers or department heads also getting evaluated?
Yes,
Okay.
everyone's
I might
getting
have missed that.
evaluated.
Okay, great.
So, Adam, Jack, myself, Eileen will be evaluating us. The mayor will probably be evaluating her cabinet.
But not from, like, the employees underneath you in your department? Like, do they have the opportunity to also?
I'll evaluate them, and then there's other, maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
Sometimes it's common practice to allow, like, even the employees underneath the supervisor or manager to be able to provide an evaluation of how they're doing, not just themselves, but
Oh, I see
how
what
their
you're
manager
saying.
is
Yeah,
doing.
I didn't think of that, but that's certainly something to think
It just comes
about.
from, like, another perspective,
Yeah.
too, so you get to see it from,
I haven't
yeah.
thought of that. That's
Yeah.
something to think about. Thank you.
No problem. And what's the onboarding process like for new employees? they just get trained by their specific department, or
Okay, so
in
with
addition to getting the employee handbook?
Onboarding is just, basically, they come in, they do the set paperwork, they go to their department, and then, and this is another part that we all need to work on, which, you know, when I think about 2024, one of the things that I'd like to work on is like a mentor program, because we fall a little short when it comes to training for new employees. We do all the, we check all the boxes of what we have to do to onboard somebody, but as far as making the experience really smooth, we can improve. I think that, you know, if we can develop a little mentor program for new employees where they can go along with someone, a coworker that's been here a little bit longer, even tag along with the manager for a little bit, that's kind of what I'm looking at for 2024.
Okay. Yeah, because I know even for like per diem jobs that I've had like, you have to go through so many hours of training. It's ridiculous, but a lot of the things that we already know, but you know, like there's safety trainings and things
And
like that that are
that's part
required.
of the monthly trainings that we're doing now, is a lot of like safety related. We pick a different topic every month, and I want to expand on that so that we have longer trainings over, you know, more in-depth subjects next year, which is why I asked for more money for training next year.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking of the line items, the biggest jump, I think, in your budget ends up being in professional services. We're seeing that $150,000 jump from the $600,000 budgeted last year. So the year prior, I think we were in the 500 region. Right now,
Yes.
about year to date, we're in about the 500 region. We budgeted for 600 this year, but it's going to jump to 750, so $150,000 increase. Can you explain the increase in professional services?
There's well, across the board, everything is inflated. So let me just start there. But I can tell you that most of the professional services are, we have a lot of, like, we pay for arbitration through there. We pay labor counsel through there. We pay Willis Towers Watson through there. We pay drug testing through there. I mean, there's just a number of vendors that we pay through there. You know, we have 2 union negotiations that we're going to be working on this year. The clerical union, this upcoming year, the clerical union, their contract is up in December, and then DPW is up next December. So we will probably be starting with DPW, I would think maybe in the fall, early fall. So that's really, it's just
So
kind of.
is that increase, is that earmarked for anything specifically, or just the fact that you know
No.
that budget or contract negotiations are going to be
Yeah,
coming up?
just knowing what's coming, what's ahead of us. Nothing in particular. Does anybody else have any questions, or? I think we're good, right?
This is my slide?
Did you want, this was the workman's, I'm sorry. So this is the workman's comp numbers, if you had any questions. So the first column is for lost time incidents. You know, something happens at work or whatever, and they need to leave, they cut their finger, whatever might happen. The next one over is for medical-only claims. So maybe they needed to get stitches or a cast or something like that. And the RO is the record only. So it's where they come in and they're not necessarily hurt, but they fell down the steps. So they just want to report that they fell down the steps even though there is nothing to be done at that time. They just want it recorded as an incident in case something does happen or does come of that. If you look, the total claims is 94. The total incurred, just, you know, if you compare from the year before, it just keeps going down. And I think this is because of the process that we put in place. I think it's a lot of things. It's kind of the perfect storm right now. It could change, but I think, you know, between the process that we have in place for our employees when they do get hurt, from the very onset of the injury, and there's constant follow-up and someone by their side from the time it happens, really makes a huge difference. So I think the numbers really speak for themselves. And then this is the budget. Asking for a 2% increase, which is far below the average. I don't really have anything to say about that unless you guys have any questions.
I have a quick question about benefits. So,
Okay.
so for the director of the redevelopment authority, we're going to be providing benefits to that a non-employee. How does that work with Willis Towers? How does that work with Highmark?
Okay, so we're not really paying for it. They're reimbursing us for everything.
Yeah, but they're receiving benefits from the city, correct? I know we're self-insured. When I was on school board, there was a non-employee who got benefits, and it didn't end up well. So I'm just confused as to, this is allowed by Highmark. Willis Towers is aware of this. Are they?
They are, but I can certainly check into it further for you if you'd like.
Definitely. I'd
Okay.
like something in writing.
Sure, absolutely.
And the same goes for the salary reimbursed, right? So where is that money coming out of? What line item is that?
If you look in the budget, it's under other salary.
I still can't wrap my head around that this is not a city employee receiving salary and benefits. I just have trouble with that.
So the funding for this comes from the redevelopment authority. So we will invoice the redevelopment authority quarterly, and they will pay the city. So this is just the line item that we're able to expense it out of.
But why are we doing it?
Why? Well,
the authority can't afford it?
the redevelopment authority would only have one employee. The costs of the redevelopment authority to be able to stand up the back office infrastructure to fund one employee would be extremely expensive for them to do that. They do contend in time, if they can build their operation and have additional staff, then they can move out onto their own. But right now, they can't support that.
Where is the revenue going to come to reimburse? They can't afford an employee to begin with.
No, if they could afford other employees, they could afford this employee.
Well, if they could, why are we paying for it?
But we're not paying, they're reimbursing us.
Okay.
And that
And we're giving them
salary-
benefits.
I think
They're
Mark
going
wants
to
to know,
pay
why
for
aren't
that.
they paying for it up front?
Why aren't they doing it themselves?
Why is it kind of running through us?
It's never has before.
Right, but in order to go through a payroll process, they don't have a payroll company to use. So, we have a volunteer board that would be trying to do this operation. So that's why it was coming through the city.
And then that salary is coming out of that other salary line item in the Human Resources Department?
That's where it is, yes.
But we will get that back
From where?
from the redevelopment authority. They'll reimburse, we will be invoicing them every quarter.
But where are they going to get their revenues from to pay you back?
That, I don't know where
They
they
have
would.
revenue, plus they will be writing grants and using the administrative funds from the grants. They actually have revenue now. The similar process works where we get reimbursed for the resource officer at the school. We invoice them, and they pay us.
But they are actual employees of the city, the resource officers.
Right, but it's a reimbursement process.
I understand that part of it, for the SRO part of it. This, I have trouble wrapping my head around. If they have the funds, you said they have the funds, let's move on. This is just something that's, I have a problem.
Anything else, Kaylee?
No, not. Do you guys have any other questions? Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, council. Jessica Eskra, city solicitor. Ninth budget cycle with the city. Happy to be here today, and I thank you for your time. So generally, just want to walk you through some of our statistics for the year and our operational work. So we've done 224 pieces of legislation so far this year. That is a record in recent memory, and I'm sure you appreciate all of the fascinating subjects we've put before you thus far. We've also prepared over 85 contracts year to date. The city has been extremely busy with projects, and we've been processing those timely. We've also been participating in labor matters, namely the Act 111 proceedings for police and fire, and also assisting with a number of really key financial matters for the city of Scranton. We've been actively involved in the annual S&P rating review, where we got upgraded to investment grade status, and facilitated the capital borrowing that just was undertaken this fall. Additionally, really the core, the heart of the law department, we've had a banner year for litigation. So this year we've seen our litigation really wrap up a number of lawsuits that were lingering for quite some time. Overall, I'm happy to report that litigation for the city has decreased by 56% compared to last year. We went from a high of 30 active cases this time last year. We're now down to 13, which is a positive trend for the city. If you recall, litigation was a pretty big focal point for S&P, for our recovery advisor, Pell. It was inescapable and something that really, I think, added to the negative view of the city from a financial perspective. I feel as though now at this point that has gotten much more under control. Looking back over the last 5 years, just to encapsulate this experience that we've had and where we're trending to now, when I look at the high stakes cases, those that involve challenges to fee disputes, tax challenges, pension matters, constitutional claims filed in federal court, I've given you some statistics here. So we really do take a tailored approach to each case. We fight when necessary. We settle when it's in the best interests of the city for a rate that's reasonable. So I'm proud to report that we've won or had dismissed 6 lawsuits of those larger tax, fee, pension, and federal matters. We've successfully settled 10. The estimated potential exposure of those suits going back over the last 5 years was in excess of $190 million. And the total amount expended to date is approximately $3.6 million. I will also note, as an aside, in the litigation realm, we were successful in appealing a jury award that resulted in a net savings to the city of $329,000. And we also avoided threatened litigation for a breach of contract claim, you all know the one, that resulted in additional savings to the city of $1.29 million. I can also add that we, at this point, have in our hopper for delinquent business privilege and mercantile tax collection 70 matters. Now, I wanted to highlight, I generally routinely give you guys an overview of litigation as a whole, but I wanted to highlight what's happening in the law enforcement liability realm with our police cases, because we've seen a bit of a change in that arena as of late. So statistically, from 2017 to present, the city has experienced 13 lawsuits relative to its police department. We do provide insurance coverage and defense counsel, and the law department manages the defense of each of those matters. 10 suits have now been resolved of that 13. 5 were dismissed completely, and 6 have been settled for a total output of $462,000. We have 2 active cases that remain pending at this time. I really wanted to highlight what's happening at this point, however, with insurance coverage for law enforcement liability. So from 2019 to present, we have increased our liability limit. This was at the recommendation of our insurance broker, Bob Knowles, to compete with industry standard. But we've seen our premium dramatically rise, and we've also seen our deductibles increase. So at this point, while, overall, I'll be pleased to get to this in a moment, our law department budget that I'm proposing is actually less than what we had last year. We're proposing a cut to our budget. It is not as substantial as I had hoped because of the rising deductibles we are seeing in law enforcement. So we are proposing a decrease in expenditures of $32,000. This amounts to a 4% savings from last year. That's largely driven by our professional services and less of a need to rely upon outside counsel as we have built out our capacity internally. I have increased, due to our larger complement of full-time attorneys in-house, nominally dues and subscriptions, training and certification. This is for us to have more up-to-date legal research engines, CLE trainings that are required for our law licenses and such. Our staffing that we're proposing remains consistent. I do wish to retitle some of those positions. I want to be clear that this is a change in title only. It would not be the creation of any new positions, no additional strain on the budget. What I'm proposing we do is shift the tax solicitor, who is full-time, to part-time and supplement that with external resources to really give the single tax office the resources that they need. And I also propose that the part-time code enforcement position be expanded to full-time and made to be a general assistant solicitor. I believe, our code enforcement department has been extremely active and aggressive, and I think additional support is very much needed. I don't have to tell you guys the amount of blight complaints that are received by the city. I know you're very familiar, and I think more than, zealous in your requests to us to have those addressed timely and correctly. And so I think having the legal resource on the back end is really critical to our response.
Now, say what you said again about the part-time.
So we would be shifting the part-time code enforcement solicitor to full-time, and that would be a swap with the tax solicitor position that is currently full-time. That would go down to part-time.
So as of last year's budget, wasn't the tax solicitor a part-time position?
Tax solicitor has been full-time for this past year. I believe that given the volume of business privilege and mercantile cases that remain pending and the resources that Kathy Wexler needs to do her job effectively, perhaps approaching a firm with larger capabilities rather than a single individual may be more effective. There is a timeline on these cases that we need to be cognizant of. Additionally, I think there is room to explore dividing and conquering on some shared services with the school district and the tax realm.
And for the code enforcement solicitor, about to increase to full-time, you said that those responsibilities and duties would expand and become more general for the law department?
Yeah, so still a heightened focus on code enforcement, but the ability to also pick up additional work on contracts. Let's say, for example, the amount of legal work that's involved in having a flooding event, right? That needs some immediacy, and that really expands the workload. So having that flexibility will be key to us being responsive.
So would that take away from what they're doing with code enforcement? Or
no, my
it's just
priority
adding
will
more
be
to-
code enforcement, number one. If there's additional things that you have capacity for, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Thanks, Jess. Eileen?
Thank you.
Matt?
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Matt and I are going to tag team, and we'll go over the revenue highlights as opposed to walking through the whole budget and expenditure highlights for you. So in the city's overall real estate assessed valuation has been steadily declining, as you all know. Between 2022 and 23, we've lost over $1 million in assessed value. That equates to $120,000 of tax revenue to the city at its current millage rates. Thus, that is why we've proposed a 3.5% tax increase to make up for that loss, plus to affect some of the increases we've seen, in particularly to the MMO and personnel costs through our arbitration awards to police and fire. What we have determined is this tax increase would equal approximately $36 to the average residential property owner in the city. Our refuse fee, we have proposed a modest increase to the refuse fee. Because of the rental licensing ordinance that was passed by council this last year at this time, we've been able to track down additional rental units that have not been registered before. To date, it's over 250 units that were not registered and not being billed for refuse. That equates to over $75,000 in additional revenue. We do expect, as this process continues on, that we will see additional revenue coming in from that stream. Real estate transfer tax, the city is still continuing to benefit from the robust real estate market. We anticipate that this will continue to remain active. We are very aware and cognizant of the fact that interest rates may have a cooling effect, but at this point we have not experienced that. So in 2023, we budgeted $4.5 million for real estate transfer tax. This year, we conservatively budgeted $4.5 million. As of this data pulled today, we're already at $4.5 million for the year. In our earned income tax, we have steadily seen increases over the last few years in economic growth. We've noted, when we were here previously with Selena Andiapan from Economic Development, that there's nearly 100 new business starts in the city in the last 2 years. So in the 2022 budget, the unaudited total of EIT was $32 million. In our 24 budget, we've modestly suggested that it would be $33.1 million in EIT. From the data that we are now getting in, we believe it will be as high as $33.5 million. So we budgeted very conservatively. We're happy to say we're achieving higher totals than we've budgeted. Payroll preparation tax is another, been very successful for us. It's been better this year now that the city and the school district are both collecting payroll prep tax. So in the first year, the city experienced $1.3 million in revenue in 2022. To the date of September, when we put the budget together, it was $2.1 million. As of November 7th, we are up at $2.6 million in collection for this year. We budgeted $2.4 million for the 2024 budget. One of the things I'd like to call your attention to is, just as the same as when we talked with Director Reager about having additional line items, in the budget for code enforcement, you'll see that there are additional revenue line items that are pulled out more explicitly. When OpenGov was implemented, some of those line items that were initially in Finance Plus and Community Plus were rolled together. So we had generic permit and license line items. I think there were building permits and plumbing permits. So with the help of IT and code enforcement, we were able to go back, redefine those line items, pull them out, so we'll have a better window on the building permits, mechanical, electrical, health licenses, so we'll be able to see it much better in 2024. Interest income, the city had been not using an interest-bearing account in PNC. With Matt's help and help from PNC, we just recently transferred that account over to be an interest-bearing account. We've also reestablished our relationship with Pliget so that we can have, that's a governmental investment trust, so we could invest dollars from the general fund in Pliget as well. We're anticipating $600,000 in interest next year, which is a big change from how we've been operating previously. grant reimbursement. So you'll see in this line item, we're projecting $3.1 million. Now, this includes some of the remaining FEMA dollars that have been expended out at this point, but we have not received the money back, and additional grants that we have applied for. This number, too, is very modest. We have a lot of grants that are out awaiting funding approvals from the state and the federal government. So I believe we'll see a really good return there on grants next year. And the last on this slide is other funding sources. If you recall in October when the borrowing went through, so the borrowing was for capital projects. So you'll note in this year's budget, there's an appendix. So the capital projects that we have borrowed for are specified in that document. So we'll see there's a mix in there of capital expenditures for fire apparatuses, IT upgrades, DPW upgrades, parks, and grant matches. And this is just, and you'll see this is in your budget. This is what it looks like, so tallying to $3.1 million in projects that we will expense out of this fund. So some of the expenses that impacted us this year, we had talked before when the mayor was here and when Chief Carroll was here that we had a $3.1 million increase in our MMO. That totals, for the entire MMO for the city, it's $18 million, $18.3 million. We also had a $1.1 million increase in police salary from the arbitration award, almost a $500,000 increase in fire salary from the arbitration award. And with our health care, we have done, Kaylee has done a phenomenal job with our health care, but we still are experiencing $500,000 in additional fees that we anticipate this year and costs through health care. Our liability and casualty insurance, as Attorney Eskra had mentioned, will be nearly $300,000 more than it was last year. The single tax office will see a 5% increase in their salaries, and DPW will have a total, it's a two-step increase of 3.5% in 2024.
Yeah, if I could just give a couple of backgrounds on these two. The increase in the MMO was mainly attributed to the market last year, because they do the evaluation every 2 years, so they took the evaluation of 1/1/23, so the market was low, so that's why the MMO went up, and it'll be probably the same amount next year, pretty much the $18 million until the reevaluation is done on 1/1/25, depending on the market and the return of the assets. In most of the years, the average has usually been about $300 to $500 increase in the MMO, but because of that aberration last year in the market, that's why it went up so much. And we went on the recommendation of PFM, TJ Anderson, Foster & Foster, the actuary, that this was the way to maintain it, because the city put a lot of investment into the pensions over the last 10 years, including the money from the sewer sale. And so to keep that, maintain that consistency and the growth in the pension funds, the funding part of it, that's why it went up so much. And also for the salary increases too, as was mentioned, the arbitration came down this year, but for the last 2 years, the city has been budgeting the status quo really from 2021 at the end of the contract. So that's why you've seen the large increases this year, because you're taking back wages from 2020, really the end of 2022 and 23, and now you're seeing 2024 is in there, so that's why the gap is so large. Next year, the police and fire, the police next year is 2% in January and 2% in July. And the fire is pretty much similar. I think it's 1.5. So you won't see that large increase like you did this year, this $1 million, because we'll be back on par to where they should be. And the health insurance, just to let you know, was a 3% increase, being self-insured. We increased that 3%. We talked to Willis Towers, and they said 2%, but we were a little bit more conservative on those costs with some additional new employees too. We made it 3%. They said with the savings, it probably would have been about an 8% increase. So the savings kind of chopped that down from what Jessica and Kaylee mentioned before with the administrative costs and through the arbitration awards. And one thing I want to mention too is this is historical, but the past interest arbitration awards with police and fire, if you remember going back to the 2000 decades, you would get an interest arbitration award and they were appealed, either by one side or both sides. So as I mentioned before, that status quo from 2021, that would carry on for almost 8 years, because there was like 2 arbitration awards. So when the award finally came down from the Supreme Court, you had to go from what was the salaries in like 2002 to 2003 to 2010. That's why that was such an enormous amount. But in this one here, neither party, both parties, they negotiated in good faith, and they both accepted the arbitration award. So I think that is a plus that might have been overlooked, is that neither side appealed these arbitration awards, and they had the confidence and the faith of the process through the arbitration process.
So coming back to the pensions, the city pensions are in the BA budget? And we're seeing that increase from 600,000 to 800,000? Is that the increase that you're talking about, a $200,000
No,
increase?
they're in various different.
The police has their city pension line item, fire has their city pension, and that's 3.1 million increase. That's aggregate. Yeah. If you see each one, and if you go to police, you'll see the police, fire, and DPW administration is where the other one is. But it's actually called city pension in each one. And you'll see the
BA budget, correct?
BA? No.
Not all of it.
No.
Okay. So I'm talking specifically with the business administration budget.
Yeah,
I
it's the
believe-
non-uniform.
Yeah, so it's, fire is in their own budget, police is in their own budget, the rest are lumped together. DPW, most of their members, if not all at this point, have the IAM pension, so they're in their own budget. The remainder fall within the non-uniform, and that would be within the BA budget.
Yeah.
Correct. And the increases that Mr. Domines is talking about, this one here is about 200,000, and that's the
In the,
increase you're
yeah,
talking
in the BA's office, yeah. That's the non-uniform part of the composite. Right.
All right. Some of the other bigger jumps in that budget I see is the other salary budget. So what, the other salary budget for last year was 48,000, and this year it's 108.
Yeah, the other salary, yeah, well, it includes the outreach coordinator, half of the salary from the OECD. That's 25,000. Half of the digital
How long will that
content.
be funded?
Pardon?
How long is that going to be funded again?
That's an ongoing position. That's a hired individual.
So now it's here. So is this the full
It's half
funding?
in
Is this
the
your?
OECD pot and half in the BA's pot.
Gotcha. So last year was 48,000. This year it's 108. Can you give me that breakdown?
Right, so there's other employees in there. The digital coordinator is also
Right.
in that pot, and there's
The
one more.
communication coordinator.
And communications, right,
Communications is a new position for this year.
right.
And then the other big jump is professional services. So in 2022, you actually spent about 300,000. About 600,000 was budgeted last year. Right now, we're at 150,000, but we're budgeting again for 600,000. Is there anything else coming this year that we should know about?
There's one other thing, and it's on the slide that we want to add, so the HUP test is in there.
The HUP test is going to be included in this year's or next
24
year's?
is professional services, right. My last bullet on there is financial projections. We would like to solicit a vendor to do fiscal forecasting for the city so that we have a better handle on what our finances, what our liabilities look like going forward to project out a few years.
So that's going to be included in that 600,000 coming up for the 2024.
Correct.
And there is in there, too, part of the OPEB trust ordinance was that the city would pick up the administration, the expenses for the trust. That would be the PFM for the advisory service, the custodian services at Fidelity, to preserve the body of the trust and let it grow instead of it being deducted from the city, made $2 million investment. Instead of it reducing that through these costs, and the ordinance it had, once the city would assume those costs until the balance of the body of the trust got to about $10 million, then it would be reevaluated. But to let that grow through the interest income and any additions that there is in addition going into the OPEB trust this year of $200,000 in the budget, to let that grow, we didn't want the administrative costs to keep reducing that down and falling behind the 8 ball, so the city picks up those costs.
Okay, well, back to professional services. Is there anything else coming this year that we're going to be expending in the last, well, this goes to year-to-date of September. Any big purchases in professional services?
I don't believe there's anything big that will hit in the professional services before the end of 2023.
Yes, correct.
I don't believe there's anything that I'm aware of right
So
now.
we should be falling under budget on that one. There should be a, okay.
Yeah.
And then, can you remind me what the hub test, what the cost of that was?
So the hub test, we're still in the process of getting the legislation through. So the hub test, when we interviewed the vendor, so we only had one vendor, so we put it out for bid twice, we only had one vendor. $200 an hour, I believe, was the legal, and I don't remember the cost of the paralegal in it. But when we talked to the vendor, I think this is going to be a two-step process, right? The first step in this, after we got done talking, we believe probably will be about $35,000. And that will be to evaluate all of the properties on it, check with the tax assessor's office, Recorder of Deeds, and find out, are they truly, if they're truly nonprofit or not. That'll be the first step. The second step would be, are we taking them to court? Are they fighting us on it? And that's going to be something that, we're going to have to really, work with council and the administration to figure out, what are we taking to court? What are we going to do? How far are we going to go? And, as we talk to the vendor, it becomes a cost-benefit ratio too, depending on what it is. So I think once we get through the first step, we'll have a clearer idea of, do we really have a number of institutions that we need to really go after legally, or, are we in good stead?
Okay.
Potential gains, like,
Right, is it a potential gain, or are we going to spend a lot of money in legal fees and not make a gain? So in the BA's office, we've looked at some improvements.
Oh, so back to those legal fees. So
Yes.
at that point in time, if we're going to, spend money on legal for that, where would that be coming from?
That would have to come out of professional services,
In this account here?
in that account there.
Back to legal fees. When it comes to labor counsel, where is that line item in the budget?
That is in HR. Yeah.
HR.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So looking at some improvements in the BA's office. So we've been working on our procurement process, and we had asked our legal staff to do a deep dive on procurement advertising, what's actually legally, statutorily required of us to do. And we found that we have over-advertised. We don't need to do quite as much as we're doing. So we've been able to reduce the amount of print in the newspaper, and this has realized hundreds of dollars for every single ad that we put in. Another piece that we're looking at is repay. So repay is a revenue enhancement process. We're looking to start it with ARPA. How it works is when we're ready to do a check run, we're ready to do payments, the vendor works similar to WePay that does our payroll. They will do our payments for us, and they'll do them either via a credit card, via an ACH transfer, or via a check transaction. So if it is a credit card transaction, there is a reimbursement, just like it would be on anyone's personal credit card, and the fees for ACH transfer were 35 cents and $1 for a check, actually lower than what we could actually do now. So that will be revenue back to the city. If we're successful with the ARPA dollars, we figured we would start there because it's the most contained funding and the easiest to manage. So we would spread it on to other areas of the city. Capital funds account. So this is different than the capital funds account I discussed earlier. This is something we would like to establish for 2024. And what we would do is use the revenue we got from the repay, revenue we got from the interest, and start establishing that account. So what we find when we apply for grants, and if the grant needs a city match, you'll see them in the budget. You'll see matches in the budget. That artificially inflates the budget because we have to account for that match whether we're getting the grant or not. We won't need to do that if we have a capital funds account, and that could be what we use as the pot to do matching. When I first started here, one of the things that staff had shared with me is we often didn't apply for grants and passed on them because we had no match. And it really was, we were fortunate now because we're able to develop a system where we use CDBG dollars and we have ARPA dollars to do the match. But there will be a time when we don't have the ability to do that, and we want to stay aggressive in grant funding because we've been able to do so many great things throughout the city with that. The other piece that's in tandem with that is the OPED trust. So in 2022, we established the OPED trust, In '23, we were able to deposit $2 million into the OPEB trust to get it started. Now, it's not even close to what our liability is, but it's a good step forward. We want to continue that in 2024 by making a deposit. So in 2024, we have budgeted a deposit of $200,000 to put into that fund. One thing interesting about this was looked on very favorably by S&P when they rated us, did our rating, because we're looking to make steps in the right direction to account for this liability that we have. Kaylee did a great job discussing the workers' comp expenses. We had a really great call with the Department of Labor and Industry this past week, and they're very pleased with the progress that the city has made over time with our workers' comp program. And as I mentioned before, the final financial projections.
Yeah. If I could add a little bit, the financial projections is another cost that would be in the professional services and VA. That would be basically what kind of similar to what was done under Act 47. We would take next year as the base year and go out 3 years with projections and try and keep rolling that going forward. So that'll be an RFP for next year to put that out for someone to do that.
And that was some of the stuff that Pell was doing, what?
Very similar you would see in the recovery plan, yeah. So we want to get that going forward. And then what was the other one? Capital fund?
Capital fund and OPEB.
One of the reasons for the capital funds, a lot of municipalities have a separate capital fund. This is an operating budget, but there's a lot of capital expenditures in here. So we want to, one thing with the capital fund is you can see we kind of did it this year with the Appendix A. That's all capital spending that's in here that's being funded through the capital borrowing. But a capital fund would be something similar. We're trying to pull some of these capital expenditures out of the budget, so this is more a truer reflection of an operating budget without the capital expenditures, and the capital expenditures gets funded on its own. And just like we have the transfer going into that capital fund, like every year the city can make transfers into that capital fund for these things. So that would be the other one going forward. And on the reduced workers' compensation expenses, part of the, every year the city gets a requirement from labor and industry for a funding account that they use for the following year that pays all these workers' claims that Kaylee put up there. But that was reduced again. Last year it was $3,174,000. This year, for 2024, it's down to $3 million, which is based, again, on the progress done on workman's comp. Just so that you know.
I have a question about the repaid revenue enhancement. So you said that's going to be funded by ARPA.
No.
No?
No, we're going to
Did I hear
use
that
it.
correctly?
No, there is no cost to it. It's money to us. We're going to use it to start off with to pay the ARPA bills.
Okay. What about, how much is left in the lost revenue ARPA pot?
It is all
All been
budgeted.
dispersed?
Well, it's not dispersed, but it's
But
budgeted.
it's targeted, or there's?
Yes, it's for the pool, the roof.
Okay,
And
so there's none left?
no, there's none left to
Okay.
spend.
I'll do this one. This is just the city has, as you know, they have the investment and the debt management and the fund balance policy. So as we put together a budget, just to give you an idea on where the city budget matches up on these policies. So the debt management policy states that it limits the annual tax-supported debt service to 10% of operating expenses. The tax-supported debt service is $10 million next year. That's minus the PIB loan, all the other loans, and that's only 9%. So then that includes the financing that was just closed this past week for the capital fund of $4 million. That includes the debt service. So the city, the budget, the debt service is under the cap. And for the fund balance policy, the city's goal, it states, is to maintain, this is in the policy, to unassigned fund balance of at least 8% of the 2024 budgeted expenditures. 8% of the 2024 budget expenditures is $9.5 million. I know fund balance, if you look into the 2021 audit, the unassigned fund balance was $12.3 million. So, and last year, the city finished December 31st unaudited around $14 million. This year, we're projecting, because we have some one-time costs, probably around $11 million, 12/31. Again, that is unaudited. GFO recommends that the city has, any municipality, and that's the Government Financing Officers Association, has 2 months on hand of revenues or expenses. And in this budget, 1 month would be, let me get my notes, about 9.9 million. So 2 million, for 2 months of reserves, they're recommending about 19 million, okay? As I mentioned, the audit has about 12 million. Last year, we finished about 14 million. So we're not at that goal yet. You know, that's their stated recommendation. But so you figure, the end of this year, we're estimating about $11 million. What's the significance of that? You notice in the budget, there is no tran, okay? City saves about $100,000 between interest that we would pay on that money while we're holding it, and then the fees. That money at the end of the year will be used in January, because we still have expenses. Usually the tran will cover those expenses to bridge you till you start getting money in February. But we have, every January, the city experiences about $7 to $7.5 million expenditures, because only about $1 million in revenue, so we're upside down. But that's where you would draw on the fund balance. Another positive of the fund balance is an example for this year. You had in March the $2.2 million paid back to the Lackawanna County Treasurer for the money that the city received last year that should have been going to the school district. Again, we went through that. This fund balance, the city was able to cut a check back to the Lackawanna County Treasurer. If 10 years ago, that was a borrowing, boom, operating expense. Legal settlements this year, $2.5 million paid in September, came from fund balance. And again, the 1.229 that was just paid. These are one-time expenses that weren't budgeted last year. Fund balance was able to help the city absorb them. Otherwise, both of those, you would have had to do borrowing. And the city did do a borrowing this year, right? It did $4 million. But the key difference between that borrowing and the borrowing that would have been needed was they would have been borrowing for operating expenses. This borrowing was for capital. And if you remember when I was here with Attorney Koslansky and Scott Shearer, the reason why the borrowing was put that way was you're really replenishing the general fund by that $4 million that took the $6 million hit. But instead of using it for operating, as you see in the budget, the Appendix A is pulling some of that out. You're using the borrowed funds for capital instead of operating. And that's what is I guess you would say S&P, they look at you to use, you're going to borrow money, use it for capital. Operating, that's a negative. That's a sign of distress. So when we did it, the way it's set up now, that the city has that fund balance is these one-time expenses. And if we didn't have it, just an example too, back in March, we were under a lot of pressure because that money was going to the school district, but it was actually going to municipal revenue sources, and they needed that money to make a payment on a debt. So we were getting a lot of pressure, get us that money, get us that money. If we didn't have that money to cut, who knows where that would have been. It might have been a lawsuit towards the city or some kind of an injunction forcing us to pay it. The same thing with the settlement in September. That order came down, I think, August 24th. You had 20 days to pay. The city was able to cut that check. If we didn't pay that in 20 days, interest would have started accumulating until you closed on the loan, so it would have increased the cost. And again, the fund balance too, going back to S&P and your credit rating, looked down highly back in May when we got the investment grade. I think the liquidity and the fund balance that they saw in the 2021 audit is really what pushed them over, reducing the liability and legal and all the other expenses, but the fund balance and having that liquidity. So again, going back to where I started this with the GFOA, because there's a lot of like, well, we have all this money. And one other thing too is, remember, city revenues are very cyclical. You know, you get cash heavy April, May, and June because the real estate comes flooded in, and so you sit on this cash. But just an example, today, we sit on $21 million, okay? Between now and the end of December, $10.5 million is going out to the MMO. 3 paychecks left. That's about $5 million gone. Healthcare, $3 million out the door. That's down to $2.9 million. So you could sit there today and say, well, the city's got $21 million in the bank. The city has $18 million in expenditures between now and the end of the year. That's a lot. Now we're going to get revenue in. We'll get earned income tax in. We'll get some real estate. That's why when I mentioned before, we'll probably finish around $10, $11 million. But that'll get us there, and that'll cover us through. So it's on the cusp, you know, where it is. So like I said, you can think about where you want this policy to be. The GFOA recommendation is $19 million where you want to be, 17, it's a policy for the city to make. But as you're going forward, these are guidelines, and I hope that this helps clarify the fund balance policy when people do say, well, the city has all this money. Yeah, you get a lot, but by the end of the year, 12/31 is when you're going to look at it. You'll see when we get the audit back what it would be, when we get to 2022 audit, what that unassigned fund balance would be. But I just want to hopefully clarify some of that for you guys.
Get a $10 million tran to cover, so.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So actually, we're in a good financial situation compared to.
And one thing is next year, you look at that MMO increase, 3.1 million. Next December, I said you're just going to pay 10.5 million MMO in the next couple weeks. Next year, that's 13.6. So it's going to hit your cash again next year. If we did that, if you had 13.6 in there this year, and on the 21 million you have today, come the end of December, you'd be negative $200,000. So, you still get your probably 8 million coming in, but next year we'd have to entertain the thought of, do we need a tran? Because of that increase in cash flow that's going to go out in those last 6 weeks of the year. So, but that's just way between now and then. A lot of things could happen, but if we had to sit here today, that's where the position would be. I wouldn't feel as comfortable not having a TAN in January if that was the scenario that we were dealing with today instead of where it is today.
Now, when you ended up saying that about the tran, you said we'd be $200,000 short. $200,000 could make or break the difference of us having to go out for the tran or not.
No, well, not necessarily. It's a total cash position. I'm saying the 3.1 hitting the cash flow is really going to be the significant part of it. Instead of making a 10.5 million, you're going to be making a 13.6 million, and then depending on, because your cash flow is going to change throughout the year. We do projections, but until revenues come in and real estate tax collections next year and earned income tax, once you get to the budget season, September is when you can look at this and say, I can do a better cash flow projection than what I could do now. To predict where I'm going to be next year in December is, that's way out there. But I could do this better in August and September once you start having a year of actual numbers coming in onto it, you can make that projection. So that'll be an evaluation when the budget is being put together next year on where that would be for next year. So, but just to give you an example, but that's something to keep in mind, that increase in MMO is an increase in cash next year that you're going to hit in December that you're not going to have this year.
When is the last time the city didn't need a tran?
I have no idea. I can't even. The city was doing 2 trans back in I remember in the late 2000s and early part of the last decade. You would get a TAN A and a TAN B. And one was about 10 million, one was about 12 million. And scrambling around at the end of the year to try and pay them off was horrifying. To say the least.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Because they have to be paid back the year that you get them. Otherwise, they return. That's a short-term debt under 1 year, but then it becomes long-term. So then it goes into a whole different part of the local government debt act.
So just to close and wrap us together, when you talk about this budget holistically, you see that we've invested in so much. We've invested in our infrastructure, in our stormwater, in our parks. We've invested in technology, as Director Reager had said. These are all really important to push the city forward. But one of the things, and it was a theme that came through all night tonight, is we need to invest in our people. We've given you the cost breakdown of other cities, other municipalities, of what their salaries were. And, to the person, we are generally behind, sometimes over 20% in salary. I think it's really important to keep our progress moving forward, that we have qualified staff, we have skilled staff, and properly compensated staff. One of the examples that came to mind when I was thinking about this is, last year we invested in rental manager. Well, that rental manager has done a phenomenal job for us and brought in, to date, over $77,000 in found revenue that we didn't have before, but we invested in that position. And Director Reager was modest in talking about all that goes on in IT, because realistically, if IT is not functioning, we might as well just go home, because it shuts everything down between police, fire, and here in City Hall. So we've had so much that we've been able to accomplish because we have a good IT staff. When we look at our project managers, we tend to have turnover in those spots because they come here, they learn a skill, and off they go for as much as $20,000 more in salary. We've got an assistant city planner. We've lost 3 assistant city planners, 1 to an engineering firm, 1 to another municipality, and the last one to the Department of Defense. These were all really highly skilled and educated young individuals, but the salary was too low and off they went. So, as we try to hire, it's really a challenge for us to hire when the salaries are not competitive and people could go elsewhere. And, Jack had mentioned his staff, the average age was 26. The crew that sits outside of me in the BA's office, the oldest one is 26. So we want to be able to bring these individuals in that are really smart, they're educated, they're dedicated to the city, but we want to make sure that we take care of them and compensate them and show them that we value their input to the city.
I think what we haven't been seeing, and something that would be beneficial for me, is looking ahead and a longer-term plan of where we want to see those salaries go. So if there is someone who is $20,000 behind where they should be, say they're at $60,000 a year and they should be, to be on par with other places, $80,000 and to be competitive. So how are we going to make up the $20,000? Like, you're going to suggest $8,000 this year, $10,000 next year, or are we going to do $5,000 a year in increases for 4 years? And I know that there's a lot that could change then once,
Right.
it comes to us, and depending on council and other factors, but that's something that would be, I think, helpful to see how many of those positions we have that are really far behind, and why we're seeing those large increases suggested now, or ones that were just increased in a large amount within the last couple of years that I've been here.
So within the budget, there is that comparative, and I understand you're taking a huge jump and a huge jump. Right, that's an impact on the budget. But we need to get them to a place that's an adequate place. Right, and not to single out the IT director, but $80,000 for an IT director is probably almost half of what an IT director could get elsewhere. So some of these are really far behind. We will never be able to be competitive with them. We see that in other spots, even collectively bargain spots in DPW. We're not going to be competitive with the water company. We just can't be. But we certainly have to be competitive enough to be able to retain our staff. Because we always forget the cost that when we have this constant turnover and churn, that there's a cost associated with that as well. So we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that part.
One of the things...
Hang on 1 second. So the thing that Jessica described has been what's happening for the last couple of years. I don't want to forget that that's what's been occurring. We've been increasing these salaries and getting to comparative. At any point in time, does the person that, the goal, I guess, that we've been hearing, it's the common theme, the theme that you gave tonight has been the theme for the last 4 years. Do we ever get to a point when the next person that gets hired drops down to the previous salary? Like, new employees that have been here for 6 months pick up right where the last person...
No, actually, we don't pay all of our salaries, all of our employees the budgeted salary. And Jack could talk to that, especially in IT. So that salary is set down. So like the assistant city planner in this budget, we moved to 55, 47 to 55. We don't have to hire the new person at 55. If they had a lot of experience, if they were, very skilled and that they've been around a long time, that might make sense. But if we bring them in and they just graduated in May from the University of Scranton, it doesn't make sense. But it does give us that ability to hire if we get somebody with that skill set.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at there. So has there been anyone that we've hired that has dropped down a salary if they haven't had the experience, like you're saying?
Yeah, Jack could talk to you about his crew.
So the reality of this deck of cards that we're given as directors is not a normal deck of cards. The way municipal government, and Matt has given me several lessons in what I'm used to versus how this reality works. To me, a budgeted position does not mean you show up and you roll. You've taken my tools away as a manager or a director. I can't incentivize you to do better. I can't invest in you if you tell me I have a competing offer. There's no tool set there. So in private sector, when you're out there, if you
Repeat again how.
So
repeat how you took the
if one of my
tools away.
people comes to me and says, let's take a different department, goes to Kaylee and says, I've got an offer, and we've seen this a number of times, even this year, I've got an offer, I'm going to move on. What, as a manager, are my tools to work with? There are none.
Well, I mean, that's how it comes with if you were working with the school board, if you were working at an agency that had a board of directors, everything has to go past the board of directors.
No, I'm sorry, you misunderstand. I can't bring that to you and ask you to increase their salary. It doesn't work like that. It's done.
So are you saying, or not you in general, are you saying within the city, say Mary's, it's budgeted for 57, Mary comes in at 54, and 6 months later says, I'm going to bail, you give her that extra money to retain her? Am I hearing this wrong? Or no?
That tool exists if somebody wants to use it, if you didn't bring them in at cap. So that's a budget. So if you think of the positions within the city, we fund positions under a department. We don't fund a department's payroll. We don't fund, an amount of money
are your
to deploy.
expenses.
Correct,
yeah.
right. So if you have folks, and we take one of the city planners who make X, and they have a better offer from the DOD, and we want to retain them, we have no way to retain that person. If their budgeted position is 50K and they're making 50K and DOD offers them 55, what do? We start the offboarding process.
I understand what you're saying. The point I'm trying to make is, you said that you bring in people under the budgeted amount.
Right.
I think to that point, though, Councilman McAndrew, you're talking about bringing people under the budgeted amount that already exists. But if you turn to the salary comps for our peer municipalities, Allentown, Bethlehem, Erie, Lancaster, all of those that are similarly situated, we are grossly under, with the exception of 2 positions, with our maximum cap. So you're saying we're already behind with our maximum cap that's permissible in the budget, and we should undercut that even further to have.
No, I'm not
room-
saying that. I'm
room to
asking,
play?
maybe I'm listening incorrectly, but
Mark, are you saying if we have a $55,000 budgeted, we approve $55,000 for a position for this year, that you might hire
no,
depending on...
I was told that you have hired people under that.
Yes.
So what I'm
Under what
saying
was
is, when they're hired under budget and 6 months from now they want to leave, do you increase that?
We have not done that.
I'm asking if you've done that because you have the money to do it. And with regards to Allentown, Erie, all them other, comparable cities, well, they didn't just exit Act 47. They don't pay the taxes we pay, the wage taxes we pay. So I hope you understand, I look at all sides. And I'm looking at the perspective as a taxpayer or a resident that doesn't make, some of them don't even make anywhere near that salary. So you have to understand that perspective of it. We constantly, I've always believed the more you earn, the more you learn. And I also believe no one knows one's worth more than oneself. I get that. But to constantly compare to other cities, it's just not fair. There's different variables that aren't taken into consideration. I know it's done a lot. It's done here, it's done at the district, at different levels, but the reality is the reality. Some raises are just too much, where others are too low within the budget. Past 3 years, I was all for consistent incremental. And I agreed to most of them, but some of them in the past couple of years were 10, 15, 20 grand. That's a hard one for me. I'm sorry. I'm just telling you how I feel. And I appreciate all the work you do and hard work you do, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I look at the big picture, and so does most of the residents.
And
I would say as our financial position improves, it gives us room to do some of those things. Listening to Mr. Domines when he says, you know, make or break that $200,000 here when it comes to cash flow, we might have to do a tran. And going back to those years of taking those 2 trans was horrible. You know, I was over at the district when we took out a $40 million loan. That was horrible. I didn't want to do it, and it was due to cash flow. And my nickeling and diming is so I don't have to be in that situation where I'm told that you're going to borrow $40 million and you have to do it now. So that's where I come from with that. While our financial position improves, I could see rate increases. You know, one that sticks out to me right now is $28,000 increase, and it's in the BA's office.
Well, actually, that, just to be clear on that, the salary was $56,000, was for 2/3 of a year. That's why it's increased for
One-third of the year was the grant last year.
Right.
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 So
So
that's
that's why
what-
it was budgeted for 56. It was budgeted last year for 56, but the salary was what it is in the budget now, because 1/3 of last year was under the contract, was from grant funding.
Matt, what
That is
position
not
exactly
filled.
was that?
That's not a filled position. That is
That's
the
the
role
finance director.
Matt is playing right now.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't describing the finance director. I was talking about the deputy business administrator.
That one
That's the
there,
same one.
That's the same one. We put deputy business administrator, finance director. It's finance director, but since I've been doing this job, I'm not really a finance director. I've been working under Larry and working under Eileen. I feel more like a deputy business administrator. That's what I'm performing. Finance director, I'm not a finance director. I do finances, but I do legal, I do administrative. I do a lot of everything in this position. I feel more like I'm helping out Larry, I'm helping out Eileen. So the finance director, I never felt comfortable as I started working in his position, so I asked the mayor and Eileen, can we make this deputy? Because you have deputy police chief, you got deputy fire, you know, you got, I think, a deputy in HR. So it just fits more in with the structure of the city having the deputy business administrator. And don't forget, under the charter, the deputy, the business administrator, the chain of command in the city under the organizational chart is mayor, deputy business administrator, and underneath the business administrator is all the department heads. That's the way the reporting is in the charter. So the business administrator is really overseer of all the departments. And then to be a business administrator, it's impossible. It's impossible. So that's why my role, I fill it in. I've always felt like, since I've been here in this position that's been created, more of helping the business administrator in all the facets of everything that they do, whether it's helping with legal, it's helping with HR, and everyone at this table and everyone who's been here would agree that I've reached out to them somehow under the umbrella of the business administrator. And so that's why we changed the title. But back to the salary part, last year it was the $58,000 because that's how much the city was budgeted for that to get through the end of the year with a finance director. And a quarter through April last year was grant funding for this year. You know, so that's why it'll come up to the full.
The year prior, correct? It was a new position the year prior.
Right. Correct, yeah. Yeah, sorry, I didn't, you know, I should have explained the change in the title on that, you know, but I just didn't, to me, and thanks to Eileen and the mayor for, you know, I asked them, you know, if this, and they want to keep the finance director, but I do think it is more of a deputy business administrator for the reasons I explained. Make sense?
Yes.
Huh?
I know you're doing the work.
Right.
I'm missing work tonight. They should be on my forklift.
Well, in last year, too, I know that going through that budget, I mean, we spent hours going through there and looking at a lot of those raises, and some of them, you know, were kind of exorbitant in terms of percentage increases, and I know that when we went and made cuts, we did scale back a lot of those increases And the hope was that maybe incrementally each year, we would try to increase them to get them to, be more competitive. But there were some pretty high percentage increases asked for last year, and they weren't granted across the board. I know for a fact that we cut way back on a lot of those requests. So, were there some decent size increases? Absolutely. But I think only to try to achieve what you're hoping to do so we can continue to retain, employees are doing a great job and so I get that. And, there is a balance. We'll absolutely take everything that you've presented to us with consideration, and I know I appreciate, and I'm sure my colleagues do as well, the explanations that you presented to us, and you make I think you make a strong case. I know that I personally appreciate the fact that this, I believe our city's moving in the right direction. I feel very confident that all the people that are working for us, including every one of you in front of us, are working diligently to try to put Scranton, make Scranton the best city, in the state. And we were just named the 4th best city to retire. But there were three other cities in the state that were higher than us for that. I don't know how they did that, but at any rate, I think that we're in a pretty good position in terms of when I ask those questions, to Jack Reager and Kaylee and all of you, are we in a better position now than we were a year or 2 years ago? And the fact that we are out of financial distress is a credit to everyone who's worked so hard, including this council and the mayor. And I feel confident that we are headed in a great direction. Will we be able to, meet all of your requests? Probably not, but will we be able to meet a good number of them? I'm hopeful, but once again, I'm one of 5 people. But I think we all appreciate all the hard work that has gone into moving the city in a real positive direction, and we're getting to see it with our parks, all the improvements happening there, the stormwater, that remediation that's happening on the East Mountain and West Scranton and North Scranton, in Manuka. It's happening throughout the city, and I think people are starting to realize that. And then the increase in the streetscapes, I think a lot of positive things are happening. So, and I'm happy to be part of that. So thank you all. I don't know if anyone else has any questions. Other than that, I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I do also want to say to the council, I really do appreciate the opportunity this evening. It's pretty profound for me. I've sat in rooms with S&P and bondholders who, in speaking with the dysfunction that used to exist between administration and council, they would say constantly, we don't want to deal with a city that can't deal with itself. And so, although I know we don't always see eye to eye on things, I don't expect you to agree with everything we have to say. I really do appreciate the open dialogue and the opportunity to engage, and I think it is really productive and helpful for the city at the end of the day. So thank you.
If I could add on to that too, one thing that all these times, these years I've read the city's home rule charter, 201 always amazes me. The mayor and council jointly shall be the governing body. When you think governing body, you think the legislative body. But the city's drafters, when they made this, the mayor and council jointly shall be the governing body. And when there's no comedy between them, and when there's more bitterness, that's when you get the dysfunction. And I remember, and I know Jessica remember, when Bob Goff sat up there. And Bob McGough really set a high standard for councils up there. And I always, because I seen it all from 2005 through. But when Bob sat up there, I always had the admiration on the way he pulled everything together and worked through the situation the way the city was in 2014, don't forget 2015, the fire pension was almost 17% funded. They were almost going on a pay-as-you-go basis. But that was when the really structure started to change. So I think that as Jessica, following up on her, working together, there is going to be differences. You're never going to have congruity across the board. But being adults and being able to work through and compromise, that is the key to any government function, is that part of compromise. It seems to have been lost in this country, but I think that's really, that's the key. Thank you.
Totally agreed. And if anybody watched council the other evening, I made sure that we remembered Bob McGough.
Oh, great.
November 19th is sadly the anniversary of his passing, and it will be 8 years. So he was a wonderful individual, and he was a great councilman. So we were fortunate to have someone like him helped to lead the charge to get us to where we are today.
Thank you.
So thank you all. Appreciate it.